doomed to die. Did you know that 1 in 8 people on Earth suffer from a mental health disorder? According to statistics, there were almost 1 billion people with mental health disorders in 2019. Such diseases lead to unemployment, disability, and crime. Among them, 2 groups are distinguished. The first includes serious mental health disorders such as schizophrenia, hallucinations, psychoses, and borderline conditions. The second category is represented by neurotics and psychopaths, aggressive and demonstrative personalities. Sometimes people are unaware of their diagnosis for decades. Some of them live a normal life without causing harm to others. Therefore, the clinical diagnosis of psychopath is not made today. The disease is called otherwise character disorder or antisocial personality disorder. Of course, not all psychopaths are violent criminals, but many of them pose a threat to the well-being of another person. For example, his or her self-esteem, mental balance, or finances. Nevertheless, there are some people who are so rude and out of control that they have to serve serious sentences for the crime they committed or be hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital. The story in question happened to Nicola Edgington, a British citizen. Amazingly, a young woman suffering from mental illness has repeatedly asked the relevant authorities, including the police, to pay attention to her condition so that she did not make trouble. And what came out of it you will learn further. On October 10, 2011, an egregious incident occurred in Bexley Heath in the southeast of England. In the early hours of the morning, 2 women were attacked on a street in the town. The first victim was Carrie Clark, a 22-year-old artist. The girl was standing at a bus stop waiting for transportation. Without a hint of danger, was listening to music. At that time, she was approached by an unfamiliar woman in her 30s. Without further ado, she jumped on Carrie and stabbed her. Carrie fell to the ground in surprise. The attacker rushed at her, but the girl's reaction was faster. She grabbed the knife with her hand before the weapon reached her chest. The unconditional reflexes to survive were stronger than the situation. The victim even managed to push her abuser away. Carrie intercepted the knife despite the pain from the blade and began to scream. She called for help. At the same time, the girl asked her attacker what she was doing and if her head was all right. To which the woman replied that the only person with a knife in her hand on this street was Carrie herself. In addition, she demanded that she hand over the knife, which the resourceful Carrie certainly did not do. The atmosphere, as well as the conversation that took place between them, puzzled the intruder, and she fled to the other side of the street. However, the matter did not end there. While passers-by rushed to the victim, the criminal disappeared from sight. It turns out that she went into a butcher shop where she stole a knife. Then she noticed another woman standing with her back to her. Without thinking twice, she rushed towards her. The attack on 58-year-old Sally Hodkin was fierce and ruthless, striking her in the neck. The attacker practically decapitated the poor elderly woman. Before she knew it, she fell to the ground and died. The perpetrator fled the scene as quickly as she had appeared. Perhaps the accidents would have continued further if not for the arrival of the police. They managed to track down the inadequate woman through CCTV cameras. A short while later, she was arrested in one of the nearby stores. At the time of her arrest, she appeared unperturbed. The law enforcement officers got the impression that she was even happy to be caught. The detainee was taken to the station where she was identified. The attacker turned out to be 31-year-old Nicola Edgington, who suffers from a mental health disorder.
The authoritative woman dictated her rules, which the young man greatly disliked, and as soon as he reached adulthood, he immediately moved to a rented apartment. Unrequited love. In 2018, a young software specialist was interning at one of the largest tourist spas in the region. His skills and abilities were highly regarded by the management, and he was offered a permanent position with a stable income. Additionally, the sociable, open, and friendly young man quickly integrated into the team and formed friendships with his colleagues. Diogo conscientiously performed his duties and was always ready to help others. At this spa center worked an attractive young woman named Maria Malvero. towards whom the new IT specialist developed tender feelings. He began to court her cautiously, but for the most part, the colleague ignored his advances. Nevertheless, she communicated with him willingly, accepted gifts, but responded to all date invitations with refusals or quickly changed the subject. Diogo unknowingly fell deeply in love with this petite, dark-haired beauty, who held a rather untraditional position as a security service employee. Maria combined strength and femininity. She was approachable yet unattainable, and the young man couldn't resist her. This was his first true love, which proved to be fateful for him. Maria, the complicated Maria Malvero, a year older than Diogo, was also a native of Albufeira and came from a very modest family. She never knew her biological father, as he left when she was very young and subsequently showed no interest in her fate or provided financial support. Maria was raised by her mother and grandmother, but her grandmother passed away a few years ago, and her mother was diagnosed with a severe mental disorder and placed in a specialized clinic. From a young age, Maria understood that she could only rely on herself, and thus she strived to make her way in life. She was seriously involved in sports from school, strong and physically developed, while maintaining a delicate and graceful appearance. In high school, she took up jiu-jitsu and even earned a blue belt. Malvero dreamed of a career in law enforcement, but due to her mother's mental condition, she was denied admission to the police academy, which greatly upset her. Instead, she underwent special training, becoming a professional security officer, and was accepted into the security department of the spa center. Maria's salary barely covered the essentials, as she had to pay for the treatment and care of her ailing mother, whose condition was deteriorating. Nonetheless, the young woman did not despair. She remained optimistic about the future and was kind and friendly with those around her. However, the infatuated Diogo misinterpreted her politeness as reciprocal interest. He even turned down a promising job offer in the capital because he hoped to win Maria's love and did not want to be away from her. The young man spent a third of his salary on his beloved, buying her gifts and taking her to restaurants and amusement parks. They soon appeared to be a happy couple, yet throughout their time together, Maria never once allowed him a kiss. However, as it turned out, her reserve was not due to excessive modesty or shyness. One day, Diogo stumbled upon a short video on social media where his beloved was hugging and kissing another girl. It turned out she had been in a romantic relationship with 23-year-old Mariana Fanesco for over a year. Devastated, Diogo confronted Maria, asking why she had not been upfront with him, but she replied that she preferred to keep her personal life private. Despite such a revelation, Gonçalves continued his courtship, never giving up hope that one day she might reciprocate his love.
The greed for easy gain Mariana Fanesco also came from a humble background and received no financial support from her family. She graduated from a nursing college and worked as a basic nurse at a local hospital. She and Maria dreamed of renting a place together to live, but their modest incomes and the need to support their families made this impossible. In January 2020, when Diogo once again invited Maria to dinner at a restaurant, he mentioned that the court case against the driver who fatally struck his mother had just concluded. The driver was found guilty and ordered to pay a substantial compensation of 100,000 euros, which had been transferred to Diogo's account that very day. Diogo spoke about it dispassionately, even with sadness, as no amount of money could bring back his closest person, and he didn't notice Maria's eyes light up when she heard the news. From that moment, their relationship unexpectedly progressed to a new level for Diogo. Maria began showing interest in him and even tenderly held his hand during walks, something she had never done before. Gonçalves couldn't believe his luck, feeling as though his deepest dream was coming true, but he did not ponder why this was happening or what caused such sudden and drastic changes in Maria's behavior. He simply enjoyed the moments, believing Maria's feelings for him were genuine. In reality, as soon as Malvero learned about the money Diogo had received, She shared the news with Finesco, and together they started planning how to seize these funds. Initially, they needed to make Diogo believe that Maria had finally noticed him as a man and reciprocated his affection. Then, the women planned to use either deceit or force to take the money from the young man and escape to another country, where they could start a new life with the stolen funds. A romantic evening turns into a brutal encounter. One day, Maria approached Diogo unexpectedly and suggested spending a romantic evening together. She mentioned that perhaps their relationship could reach a new level, that they could become a couple, and that something might develop between them. At that moment, Diogo was truly happy, and the sudden changes in the girl's behavior did not alarm him. He believed in the sincerity of her feelings. The long-awaited meeting was set for the evening of Friday, March 20th, 2020, at Diogo's rented apartment. The young man himself prepared dinner, set a table for two, bought flowers and a small gift for his beloved. Maria arrived around 8 o'clock in the evening. They sat down at the table, and she poured a fruit fresh that she had brought, urging Diogo to drink all of its contents to appreciate the taste of the beverage she had prepared. Without hesitation, he did so, unaware that the juice contained a high dose of a potent sedative that Mariana had obtained from her workplace. Soon, Diogo felt unwell. His head was spinning, everything before his eyes blurred, and he felt sleepy. He realized something was wrong and became very nervous, trying to reach his phone, but Maria snatched the device from his hands, saying she wanted to perform an erotic dance for him. She turned on the music, began to slowly undress, and the young man seemed to calm down a bit. Then she tied him to a chair, presenting it as part of the game. At some point, Diogo panicked, tried to free himself, but fell to the floor along with the chair. Seeing Maria simply watching the events unfold, he began to scream and call for help, hoping that the neighbors could hear him. Then, she pressed on his neck, after which the young man lost consciousness. After this, she called Mariana, who had been waiting in a car parked nearby, ready for a signal. When Finesco entered the apartment, she saw Diogo lying on the floor and asked what had happened. Maria explained that the dosage of the drug had apparently been too small, and Diogo had not fallen asleep but started to panic and scream. The girls noticed that he was not breathing and decided to untie him, and Mariana, using her skills, began CPR. When Diogo regained consciousness, he again began to scream, tried to resist and ran out of the apartment. But Maria, using her martial arts skills, knocked him down and performed a chokehold. A few minutes later, Gonçalves showed no signs of life, and the friends did not attempt to revive him further. The imperfect crime. Using fingerprints and Face ID, the girls managed to unlock the deceased young man's phone and access his banking app. They transferred all his available funds to Maria's account, and then pondered how to dispose of the body to delay its discovery as long as possible. Knowing that Gonçalves was expected at work the next day, Malvero decided to send a message from his phone to his boss, requesting time off due to sudden family issues. This message surprised his boss, as during his tenure, the programmer had never asked for time off, been late, or swapped shifts. The boss tried to call the employee to find out what was happening, but all calls were rejected, followed by a message from Diogo claiming he couldn't talk right now. On Saturday, still contemplating what to do with the body, the culprits went to a large shopping mall where they spent some of the money they had stolen from the victim. Surveillance camera footage showed them behaving casually, making purchases, eating at the food court, and smiling as they chatted. They did not appear tense and clearly believed they could evade accountability. Returning to the apartment, the friends decided to sever Diogo's thumb so they could unlock his phone if needed to send messages on his behalf. It was at that moment they realized the best course would be to dismember the body and scatter it in various places, staging the young man's disappearance as if he had taken his own life. They bought plastic wrap and large trash bags, and using a kitchen cleaver and knives, separated the limbs and head from the torso. Mariana's knowledge of human anatomy proved quite useful during this gruesome task. The friends then packed all the parts into 4 bags, which they carried out of the apartment late at night and loaded into the trunk of Diogo's car. Maria drove the car of her deceased admirer, followed by her accomplice in her own vehicle. They drove out of town to a cliff where they dropped the bag containing the torso off the edge, leaving the car near the cliff to make it look as though the young man had jumped. However, they failed to notice that the body did not sink, but got stuck in a crevice at the base of the cliff. They then drove a few miles to a wooded slope where they threw out the head and discarded the victim's limbs over a small waterfall. Body parts on the coast. That Saturday, the management of the spa center reported the employee's disappearance to the police, mentioning the strange messages sent from his number. However, the search for the young man did not start until Sunday, a full day after the disappearance was reported. The first discovery was his car at the cliff's edge, and initially, it was presumed he had taken his own life. But just a few hours later, authorities found a torso in a bag in the crevice below, which was soon confirmed to be Gonçalves through forensic analysis. The same day, a group of tourists reported to the police that they had found a torn bag containing a human head. The limbs were only found several days later, after extensive searches involving divers. The crime scene was horrific, but according to colleagues and friends of the deceased, he had no enemies, was kind-hearted, never broke the law, and did not associate with people who had criminal records or were linked to criminal activities. But who then could have brutally taken the life of such a quiet and friendly young man? The investigation, arrest, and initial court decision. From the early stages of the investigation, it was discovered that the young man had recently received a significant amount of money in his account as compensation from a court decision. However, it was found that mysteriously, this money had been transferred to Diogo's colleague, Maria. She was interrogated as she and Mariana were about to leave the country through the airport. Malvero was caught off guard. She did not expect the police to track them down within just a few days. She confessed immediately, claiming that she committed the crime because her colleague had pursued her and tried to coerce her into intimacy. She also asserted that she had planned and executed the crime on her own, insisting her partner had no involvement. Nonetheless, both women were detained and taken to the station to give their statements. Maria insisted that she had accidentally strangled the young man after he tried to force her into intimacy. However, Diogo's colleagues maintained that he would never treat a woman he liked in such a manner, a sentiment supported by the correspondence between the victim and the accused. Additionally, a high concentration of a potent sedative found in the victim's blood suggested that he was incapacitated at the time of his death. Maria then tried to take full responsibility again, claiming she had committed the crime for the money. She alleged that Mariana was unaware, and when the incident occurred, she even tried to perform CPR on the young man. Mariana, however, contended that they had planned the theft together, intending only to transfer the money to their account and then flee, but that things did not go as planned. There was no doubt about the guilt of the women, but determining their exact roles in the crime proved challenging. Both pleaded to be placed in the same jail during the investigation so they could at least see each other, but despite their requests, they were placed in separate detention facilities, denying them any communication or contact. The trial began in July 2020. Despite Malvero's persistent claims of sole responsibility, investigators doubted she acted alone, questioning how she could skillfully dismember a body without anatomical knowledge. A 6-month period was allotted for the investigation to gather all relevant circumstances, evidence, and testimony. Throughout this time, the suspects had no contact with each other, and the case took an unexpected turn. At a hearing in February 2021, when Maria again claimed full responsibility, Mariana simply confirmed her statements, declaring she had no involvement in the murder or robbery. Maria's lover's behavior seemingly dismayed her, and a month later, Malvero changed her initial testimony. She now claimed that she acted under Mariana's direction, who was the crime's mastermind, and noted that it was her friend who dismembered the body because she knew how to do it best.
Maria added that she had initially taken the blame to protect her loved one, but realized that her friend had never truly loved her. Despite Malvero's altered testimony in April 2021, the court found her guilty of premeditated murder, mutilation of a body, robbery, and carjacking. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Mariana, as an accomplice, received a 4-year sentence, but was released on parole in less than a year. The court believed her attempts to perform CPR indicated that she had not intended to take his life and wanted to help. A new trial and an unexpected twist. After being released, Mariana Finesco agreed to give an interview to a local TV channel, a decision that proved to be a grave mistake. During the interview, she placed all the blame on her already incarcerated friend, all the while smiling and appearing very self-satisfied. Shortly after the video became public, a well-known psychologist analyzed it, explaining how gestures, facial expressions, and body language can indicate deception. He suggested that Mariana was reveling in her impunity and sense of superiority, indicating she was a seed manipulator capable of shifting all blame onto someone else. A month after her release, Finesco sued the hospital where she had previously worked, claiming she had been wrongfully terminated and demanded a significant amount as moral compensation. Surprisingly, the court sided with her, ordering the hospital management to reinstate her and pay the compensation she sought. It seemed that everything was going exceptionally well for Mariana. She was free, back at her job, and had received 40,000 euros in moral compensation. However, news soon came from the prison that Maria had taken her own life by hanging herself with a bedsheet in her cell. She left behind a note detailing aspects of Diogo's perpetration that implicated her friend. Following this incident, the case was reopened, and the victim's father filed an appeal, insisting that Finesco was as guilty as her accomplice. The Supreme Court only delivered the final verdict in June 2023, finding Mariana guilty of planning and carrying out the murder of Gonçalves, as well as dismembering his body and carjacking. Ultimately, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of early release. Since then, she and her lawyer have attempted to file appeals twice, but so far all their appeals have been rejected. Life in an orphanage is not the best. You don't have your own corner, you don't have your own time, and if you can't fight back, you get beaten up by those who have been here for a long time. Amanda and Anna Marie McClure are a little luckier than the others. When there are two of you, the likelihood of fighting back increases. Besides, these juvenile aggressors only pick on loners. The sisters were comfortable alone, and they did not try to get acquainted with anyone. They hoped that their stay in this hell would not be long. Soon their mother would find out that their father had been imprisoned, which meant that the girls were sent to an orphanage, from which they should be taken away as soon as possible. It is impossible not to find out that their father, Larry McClure, was sent to prison. It was talked about on TV and written in newspapers for a long time. Time passed. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. It became clear that we could forget about returning home. One day the sisters rescued a newcomer, Meredith, from being bullied. The girl lived with her drug-addicted mother, was very thin, frightened, and flinched at any rustle. She came to the shelter after her mother died of an overdose, and Meredith herself was afraid to call the emergency services, so she lived with her body for a few days. One day a friend came to visit her mother, and upon finding her friend dead, called emergency services from a payphone so as not to be involved in any way. Meredith became a friend to the McClure sisters, the three of them becoming more fun and safer. Amanda and Anne-Marie had never told anyone the reason they were here. Meredith had asked about it once, but Anne-Marie had brushed it off and blurted out something about a policeman father who had tried to apprehend a dangerous criminal but had been killed on the job. Amanda listened to the story with her eyes wide open, but her sister gave her a look that told her to stay out of it. Enraptured by their father's posthumous deed, Meredith told about the sisters' fate to the other students of the orphanage, and in an instant the sisters turned into real stars. They were respected, they were envied, because most of those who were here had parents who either died from illegal substances or went to prison. Eventually, all the children wanted to be friends with the sisters, and their reclusive life came to an end. Unfortunately, this beautiful life, albeit in an orphanage, quickly came to an end. Unknown from where the information appeared that the father of Anne-Marie and Amanda is not a dead policeman at all, but on the contrary, a living criminal, serving time in prison for violent acts of a sexual nature towards a young girl. Then the fate of the sisters turned into a real hell. However, after a while, they were lucky. Fortunately, 2 different families decided to adopt the girls almost simultaneously, and they got the opportunity to start a new life. But however, already separately, the connection between them broke and was lost. There are no details about the sisters' life in foster homes. Amanda and Anna-Marie could remain in this story only children of the rapist, but their adult life flowed into the most high-profile case of the state of Virginia. Amanda is known to be married to 38-year-old Jon Maguire. They met when she was already 29 years old. Her adoptive parents even began to worry that Amanda would be a loner for the rest of her life, and the lack of biological family, including the betrayal of her mother, had a negative impact on her psyche. The foster parents breathed a sigh of relief only when Amanda admitted to them that she had a young man with whom they were going to get married. It was the second wedding for Jon, and he also had 2 sons from his first marriage. Anne-Marie had never been able to build her family. One could be happy for Amanda. She really could have a strong and loving family. Jon was an incredibly positive guy. What could be said against it, if even with his ex-wife they had a warm and friendly relationship? After a while, the sisters' father, Larry McClure, was released on parole. Settling still in the same Virginia in a mobile home, he made no small effort to find his daughters.
The first place he went was to Amanda's foster parents, Gwenham and Alex. Larry went straight to their house, said hello, introduced himself, said he wanted to see his daughter and asked for her contacts, address and phone number. Outwardly, he looked very bad, even frightening, deep wrinkles all over his face, huge bags under his eyes, and besides, as it seemed to them, he was not sober. No, he didn't smell of alcohol, and he didn't stagger from side to side on shaky legs, but in general his behavior was not adequate. Glenn refused Larry's request, but promised that they would be sure to tell Amanda that her biological father was looking for her. Larry had been really freaked out when he'd heard the phrase biological father, but he'd thanked him and left. Glenn had indeed kept his word. He had told Amanda that her father was free and looking for her. In the back of Amanda's mind, there was a demon who denied everything and advised to send her father to hell, and an angel who advised to give her father, though a criminal, another chance. The angel won, though it was unclear who was better to listen to. First, Amanda called her father. He said he was very happy to hear from her, asked how she was doing. She told him that she was doing well, married and feeling happy. Larry was happy for his daughter and suggested that she come over for a joint dinner with her husband. Amanda didn't realize if she should live to see her father, but it was as if he knew just what to push. Come on, forget the old grudges. I have lived all these years with only one thought, to see you and Anne-Marie. Anna, unlike you, must have missed me after all. You've already seen her? Amanda wondered. Of course I have. We went on a nature trip with her and had a wonderful time, like a real family, like father and daughter. It was like those years of separation never happened. She also asked a lot about you. If Amanda didn't know how to deal with her father, she wanted to see her sister, who had been separated from her in the orphanage almost 20 years ago, and so she agreed. In the case file, there is no description of their first meeting, but 2 facts are known. Larry lied about Anne-Marie. At that time, she lived in North Carolina, which is 186 miles from Virginia, and Larry had never seen or spoken to her. And so, father and daughter met. Their meetings led to Larry getting Amanda and Jon hooked on illegal substances that he brewed himself in his camper. Larry literally used the daughter and son-in-law before meeting the father. The financial situation of the couple was stable, but Larry pulled money from them for the production of illegal substances, and when Amanda and Jon lost their jobs because of their addiction, Larry persuaded Jon to register, because drug addicts received help from the state in the amount of $180, which were still not enough to buy substances and ingredients. That's when Anna Marie appears in the story, and Larry uses her in the same way. He gets her hooked on substances and pulls money out of her. Amanda and Jon find themselves at an impasse. They have no jobs. Because of huge debts, they lose their house, and the only way to stay afloat is to move into Larry's camper. Jon's folks at this point still had no idea. He called his parents. His mother was seriously ill at the time. Jon informed them that he and Amanda were going on a trip together. That was the last time Jon's parents heard their son alive. In fact, no trip was planned. Amanda and Jon moved in with Larry, where they engaged in a small circle of illicit substance use and alcohol consumption. The whole tragedy occurred on Valentine's Day. Jon, who rarely recovered from the effects of illegal substances, was still madly in love with Amanda and decided to prepare a surprise for her, a festive evening in the family circle. He bought meat and alcohol, cooked a fancy dinner, at which, in addition to his wife, of course, were Larry and Anne Marie. Under the prolonged influence of the drugs, a terrible madness occurred in the family. Amanda and Larry became much closer than father and daughter. Unfortunately, Jon couldn't see it coming. Yes, you all thought right. Father and daughter considered themselves a couple. Therefore, Jon was now redundant.
During the meal, Jon spoke very many warm words to Amanda, and Larry was insanely nervous about it, and the tension grew. Eventually, Larry interrupted his son-in-law's speech and asked him if he could be completely honest with his wife. The man replied in agreement. Then Larry proposed a game. Jon's legs were tied, and he was asked to answer honestly all the questions that related to his past life. Yes, at first, the questions were really harmless. Childhood, school, university, and all that. But at some point, Larry, under the influence of drugs, began to accuse Jon that he was an undercover FBI agent, and when Jon denied it, they started beating him up. It ended when Jon, begging for mercy and covering himself with his children, tried to untie his legs and had a bottle of wine smashed over his head. Yes, it was the same wine he'd bought for the family dinner. Larry, Amanda, and Anne Marie tortured Jon for 2 days and used illegal substances in parallel. Finally, when they had had enough, Amanda pulled a black bag over her husband's head and squeezed it around his neck until he stopped breathing. Jon was buried in the backyard, after which the crazy family celebrated the engagement of Larry and Amanda, father and daughter, and naturally it had to be celebrated with a new batch of psychotropic substances and alcohol. On the 3rd day, their psyche went haywire. They began to see Jon's ghost, police sirens, and the ground in which they buried Jon seemed to them unearthed, as if Jon was able to get out of there, escape, and report everything to the police. It sounds wild and crazy, but the crazy father and daughters decided to back up. They dug up Jon's body, checked his pulse, and even his pupils' reaction to flashlight light, even though the body, for all its biological signs, was already in the decomposition stage, but that didn't seem enough to them. To prevent Jon from coming back to life and escaping, they cut his body into pieces with a wood axe and drove an aspen stake into each piece of his body. The remains were reburied in different places and covered with lime to speed up the decomposition process. 3 weeks later, Larry and Amanda were married. Larry changed his name so that no one would know they were related. The new family decided to start a new life. To do this, they moved to Kentucky and agreed to stop using illegal substances once and for all. In the rented house, to hide all suspicion from themselves, they even hung a U.S. flag over the door to the house, just like their neighbors did. By this time, Jon's ex-wife and parents began to worry that he wasn't making contact. And in 2019, Jon's mother even filed a police report about his disappearance. As for Larry, he failed to notify the police that he had moved from one state to another, and that was against the terms of his probation, which is why he went back behind bars. In prison, Larry's psyche finally failed. It's hard to expect anything good when you've been using illegal substances for a long time, mixing them with alcohol, and then, at the snap of your fingers, you find yourself in a place where you can't get them. Withdrawal syndrome works. Increased nervousness, lack of boundaries between reality and fantasy. It's pretty clear if you marry your own daughter. Larry was pretty sure that the parole violation was just an excuse to dig up the backyard and find the remains of Jon's body. He urgently needed to contact Amanda or Anna Marie and tell them to have his daughters dig up the body parts and rebury them somewhere far from home. All prisoner calls are always tapped, so the information had to be conveyed in a veiled manner. Larry even prepared a speech and thought of everything in detail, but the problem was that he was denied calls. Finally, he couldn't stand it any longer, called the policeman on duty, and told him he had something to confess. Larry's logic was that if he confessed to the murder before he was charged, he could avoid at least the death penalty. And if he blamed it on his daughters, yeah, that would be even better. The cop didn't even believe Larry at first. What murder? What body parts buried in the backyard? What was this lunatic's idea? Why would this junkie dig his own grave? But by law, the man's word had to be verified. At first, the check wanted to organize only formally. Yes, there was a statement. Yes, the place was checked. No, nothing was found.
But then it turned out that Jon is really considered missing, and just in case, to the place of Larry's residence, sent a police detachment. First on the ground, they found traces of the lime that Larry had mentioned, and then absolutely all the words of the criminal were confirmed. The McClure sisters were apprehended immediately. Amanda and Anna Marie were in shock and simply could not believe that their father, and for someone else and husband, could confess to such a brutal murder. They were even more shocked when they learned that Larry tried to make himself an innocent sheep, and in his testimony indicated that it was his daughters killed Jon, and he was only an unwitting participant in the crime. Then each of the family began to save their own skin and to convince the police that it was just him in this terrible story was an accident. It was especially hard for Jon's relatives in this situation. Since his body, in fact, there was no body and there were only remains. These remains had to be taken from the criminalists, transported to his parents and buried in a closed coffin. It has been mentioned many times that Jon was a very nice guy, so despite all the difficulties, his parents were able to bury him. Some of his friends helped with money, some with transportation, some with funeral arrangements. Jon was buried in a Lutheran church on October 25, 2019. On February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day, someone in the McClure family posted a Facebook post on Jon's behalf that he was leaving on a trip where he would not be able to be in touch for a long time and asked his friends not to worry about his long absence. This indicated that the crazy family knew that they were going to kill the poor guy soon, so they misled everyone so that the family wouldn't start sounding the alarm. Despite such a brutal crime, for the duration of the trial, Larry and Amanda had 6 months added to their sentence for the marriage of a daughter and father. As such, marriages are criminalized in the state. The trial began. Larry was given the floor. I have felt remorse for my own children for most of my life. Yes, when they were very young, I committed a serious crime that put them in an orphanage. Their birth mother abandoned them, and I was the only one who had a heartache for my little ones. I am extremely grateful to the people who adopted my babies. I will not hide. I even attended churches and prayed for their adoptive parents when I got out. I crazily wanted to make up for all the years I had missed. That's probably why I acted the way I did. I mean, I could have walked away from the crime if I'd convinced Amanda not to do it. But I confess, I didn't. Mr. Judge and jury will probably not understand me, and I share their point of view. But the thing is, they weren't in my shoes. Jon was a fine young man. I feel sorry for him. If I could, I would turn things around. But no one can raise the dead, and I couldn't say no to Amanda, my favorite and youngest daughter. But she didn't care about Jon. All she wanted was to be able to withdraw government money from Jon's account. Have you ever been willing to kill a man for $180? No? Then if you don't understand me as a father, you should understand what kind of person she is. She's a monster, not a person. Me, Amanda, and Marie, we are overly addicted to illegal drugs, so we deserve to be punished. I want to address the jury. No matter what sentence you choose for me, I'm sober about my health and say that I can't live more than 10 years. I'm very sorry for this situation, and I apologize to all of Jon's loved ones. Again, he was a great guy. The trial went on for a very long time as the defendants flip-flopped back and forth on the decision to kill Jon. Amanda, who could not tolerate such a long trial, even made a deal with the investigators where she was promised to be charged with involuntary manslaughter. At the next trial, Larry gave a very different speech. When it all started, the four of us bought the ingredients to make illegal substances and went back to my trailer where I started making them. Amanda came up to me and said she wanted to get back at Jon. The fact is that Jon, under the influence of the drugs, raped Anna Marie and she got pregnant. And as for me, I had to earn the trust of my daughters after all these years apart. I couldn't refuse, you know. I blame myself for that. I think every day that I should hang myself. But why should it be me? If this crime is their fault. After Larry's speech, Jon's family got the floor. His mother sobbed non-stop, so much so that she couldn't say a word. Even if I can ever forgive the McClure family, I will never be able to forget what happened. Also, know that I wish I could live to see the day when one of them dies before me. Then Jon's children were given the floor, who literally cursed the killers and said they would never forgive them. The judge handed down the final verdict, which sentenced Larry McClure to life in prison without parole. When the punishment for Amanda was announced, her adoptive parents were very sorry that they did confess to their daughter that she was wanted by her father. They had brought her up with freedom of choice all her life, but they did not know that this freedom could have such an impact on her future fate. Amanda, in turn, during the announcement of the verdict, said that all this is the fault of her father, who could not survive the feeling of jealousy. Amanda's poor parents asked the judge to consider that if it were not for the negative influence of her father, their adopted daughter would never have gone to such a brutal crime. However, prosecutors viewed the murder as a conspiracy so that Amanda and Larry could be together as a couple. The first hearing was dedicated to Amanda, and she was sentenced to 40 years, but the judge noted that she would probably be behind bars for only 20 years. When the sentence was read to Anne Marie, she tried her best to prove that she was against Jon's murder, but she was forced to go to the end by her father and sister. And she was a witness at the wedding of Larry and Amanda only because she was afraid for her future life. In the end, Anne Marie was sentenced to 40 years in prison. On July 3, 1989, another child was born in the municipality of Estreito in the state of Maranhão in Brazil. The boy was named by a common Portuguese name, Danilo. This child was not spoon-fed or stroked on the head with bedtime stories. He was not taken by the hand to school at school age. He grew up on the streets like all the children in this poor neighborhood. The environment for adults and children in Brazil's favelas is one of oppressive poverty, low living standards, and unemployment. All of these factors are the basis for street crime to thrive. When from childhood there is only dirt, poverty, lack of human conditions, and normal food, all existing instincts of self-preservation are activated. Everyone survives as they can or as they want. And unfortunately, more often than not, a person who from childhood has seen only violence and the speed of the result obtained by force will choose the same road of life because otherwise he does not know how. Our story today is about the horrific brutality and unwavering obsession that dooms people. In 2019, Sarah Brandau was excited to welcome her younger sister Deborah and two nephews, a boy named Ian and a girl named Yasmin, to the airport. After a failed relationship with the children's father, Deborah, 30, driven by a genuine desire and drive to provide a better life for her children, moved from Brazil to Pennsylvania to live with her sister. The family quickly settled into their new place, accustomed to the cozy home and new standard of living. Deborah Brandau and her sister Sarah were inseparable. Not only did they work together in the cleaning service, but they often talked on the phone during the day. They lived the quiet and happy life they had come to another country for. But an unexpected acquaintance changed the fates of all the heroes forever. In 2020, spending a day off with children in the park, Deborah met her compatriot, 31-year-old Danilo Cavalcante. A trusting relationship quickly developed between the young people. The man was very attentive to her and kind to her children. Deborah fell in love with her Brazilian neighbor Danilo Cavalcante and decided that she had met a suitable and trustworthy man. After a few months of their relationship, they rented a small house and began living as a full-fledged family. After a while, The hot and emotional Danilo began to get bored with the perfect family life. The closer their relationship with Deborah became, the more jealous and obsessive he became. Mistrust arising from nothing gradually turned into total control. Between the couple constantly began to erupt scandals, which ended in violence. Danilo got drunk every night and came home a completely different person. He was like an angry animal. From Deborah, he demanded complete submission and obedience, and in case of resistance, he punished her severely in front of the children. The woman was not weak. She defended herself as best she could and would not let her beloved children be harmed. Unwilling to tolerate such treatment, she returned to her sister's home, and after repeated threats, she went to the police and then to court to obtain an order of protection prohibiting Cavalcante from approaching her. Despite Deborah's numerous attempts to distance herself from Cavalcante, he pursued her fiercely, resorting to threats of violence if she dared to permanently sever the relationship. Fearing for her life, Deborah conducts a small investigation in search of answers about Danilo Cavalcante's identity. After contacting acquaintances in Brazil through social media, she finds information about Danilo's former life and the reasons for his entry into the United States. The woman realizes that her lover is not who he claims to be, and the received information throws her into shock. It turned out that on November 5, 2017, while in his native Brazil, Danilo Cavalcante fatally wounded 20-year-old student Walter Jr. Moreira dos Reis, shooting him 5 times near a restaurant in the city of Figueirópolis. An investigation revealed that the two were friends, and the killing was over Walter's car repair debt. A week after the crime, the Brazilian judicial system granted the prosecutor's office's request for preventive detention, issuing an arrest warrant. But Brazilian authorities did not have time to detain Danilo. Cavalcante was able to leave the country through Brasília International Airport because of a disagreement by the Tocantins judicial system, which did not request that the decision be registered in the National Warrant Registry until 7 months after the crime. Cavalcante entered Puerto Rico illegally. A warrant for his arrest was issued in Brazil in June 2018. After entering Puerto Rico, Cavalcante obtained a fake ID and eventually settled in Chester County, Pennsylvania, where his sister lived. After Danilo's true identity was revealed, Deborah gave him an ultimatum to either leave her alone or she would publicize his identity. This was the woman's fatal mistake. On the evening of April 18, 2021, Deborah was walking with her children in front of her house. The children were playing catch-up, and the woman was chatting quietly with an elderly neighbor. Danilo Cavalcante pulled her aside to talk. The neighbor remained waiting for Deborah and only watched the former lovers chatting. The conversation was calm, but at one point, Cavalcante pulled out 2 knives and suddenly attacked her. Deborah fell down, and he stabbed her several times. Deborah's children screamed all along the street for him not to touch their mom, but the man was in agony. He stabbed Deborah a total of 38 times. A neighbor who observed the brutal scene desperately tried to administer emergency aid and stop the bleeding. Deborah's daughter ran to the neighbor's house to ask for help and call emergency services. Deborah Brandau was taken to Pauli Hospital, but eventually died from her injuries. Meanwhile, Danilo Cavalcante fled Pennsylvania to avoid arrest and was on the run for several hours until he was found and arrested by Virginia State Police. He was extradited to Pennsylvania, where he was placed under arrest, pending trial. On August 16, 2023, in Chester County, Danilo Cavalcante's trial for first-degree murder began. The investigation revealed that Cavalcante refused to accept the end of their relationship and had intimidated Deborah since 2020 with regular domestic violence. During Cavalcante's trial, Deborah's crying child testified, recalling over and over again the horrifying events of that bloody day. It took the jury only 15 minutes to reach a guilty verdict. Cavalcante was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the verdict was announced, Cavalcante was sent to the Chester County Jail in Pocopson, where he was awaiting transfer to a federal prison. But on August 31, 2023, at about 9 a.m., he escaped from the Chester County Jail using a chimney. Like a Spider-Man, He went up across the wall between two cramped hallways and so ascended through the chimney to the roof. Deftly bypassed the barbed wire fences and escaped. Surveillance footage showed the prisoner in the narrow space between two walls in the exercise yard. He put his arms and legs on either side and walked upwards. He then ran across the roof, climbed over the fence, and pushed through the barbed wire to freedom. Prison officials were very aware of all the vulnerabilities that had been identified in the prison after Igor Bolta's escape, and believed that they had been addressed. Officials believed that the barbed wire added after a similar escape by an inmate named Igor Bolta a few months earlier would prevent a jailbreak, said Acting Warden Howard Holland. According to court documents in May, an inmate named Igor Bolta climbed onto the roof of the jail and jumped to a less secure location. He was captured less than a mile from the prison about 5 minutes after escaping.
Again, the one thing we didn't take into account was the failure on the human factors side. We only focused on the physical infrastructure, not the human factor, Howard Holland said shortly after Cavalcante disappeared. Whoever was supposed to be monitoring the prison's 160 cells did not see the escape unfold, Holland said. A guard in a tower that overlooked the prisoners did not see Cavalcante slip away. The tower guard was first placed on administrative leave and then fired. As a matter of urgency, the prison was closed, and the search for a particularly dangerous criminal began. Alerts were everywhere. Danilo Cavalcante, age 33, black hair, possibly armed and very dangerous. The escape of a dangerous killer from state prison has gotten a lot of publicity. The search for the fugitive was broadcast daily on all media channels. The Pennsylvania State Police Chief, who led the search for Cavalcante, held regular press conferences and briefings, providing accurate information to state residents about the special operation. He urged residents not to stay on the sidelines, but to take an active role through vigilance and observation to help determine the perpetrator's route. And it worked. So, about a few hours after the escape, Danilo Cavalcante was spotted walking along a road about 2 miles west of the prison. With the help of reports from local residents, Cavalcante was spotted using a surveillance camera in the early morning hours of September 2nd. Police set up a search perimeter around the area, securing the roads and railroads that run through it to prevent Cavalcante's potential escape, and put up a $10,000 reward for any information leading to his capture. Authorities began searching within 2 miles of the jail in the heavily wooded area of Pocopson Township and Chester County. A local resident spotted the fugitive in a creek bed just days after the escape, but he fled into the woods before police could find him. The search continued. The search perimeter expanded after he spent about a week on the run. A security camera captured Cavalcante at Longwood Gardens, a popular botanical garden nearly 3 miles from the jail, just south of where law enforcement initially searched for him. There's a lot of ravines, a lot of high fields, a lot of grass, a lot of cover for a guy 5 feet tall and 120 pounds, Robert Clark, Deputy U.S. Marshal for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, said September 5th. In addition to the difficult, rugged terrain, searchers had a hard time coping with the extreme heat and humidity that stood for days. After a week of desperate searches for the fugitive felon, the number of officers involved in the search for Cavalcante on the ground has grown from 250 to nearly 400. We have a large perimeter secured. We're very optimistic, the police chief said. The search team has been strengthened not only in numbers, but also in the equipment attached to the search. Helicopters flying over the search area began playing a recorded message from Cavalcante's Portuguese-speaking mother begging Cavalcante to surrender peacefully to authorities. The next morning, Cavalcante was spotted by a security camera on a property located about 2 miles south of the prison. Police moved in, set up a new perimeter around the facility, and Longwood Gardens, as well as schools in close proximity to the search area, will be closed while the search is conducted. Police continued an intensive search for the object for the rest of the week, and Longwood Gardens briefly reopened to limited access until forced to evacuate and close again after another sighting of the object on September 7th. That same day, police increased the reward for information leading to his capture from $10,000 to $20,000. After nearly a week of searching, nerves were on edge. Locals knew a man convicted of murder was on the loose, but authorities still hadn't told them how Cavalcante escaped from prison. Philadelphia residents in Chester County were asked by police to lock all doors and windows, secure vehicles, and stay indoors. CBS News reported 34-year-old Danilo Cavalcante escaped from a Pennsylvania prison.
The intense search continued until a major event on September 9th, when Cavalcante apparently broke through the search perimeter in Longwood Gardens when he was spotted on a video intercom call standing on the front porch of a former colleague's home near Phoenixville, nearly 20 miles northeast of the search perimeter. Cavalcante had a deft way of changing his appearance. He was shaved and dressed in new clothes. Danilo moved around the state with sophistication and managed to go undetected. So he stole a van from a local dairy store and drove it to Phoenixville, hoping to get help and shelter from acquaintances. On the morning of September 10th, a stolen van with an empty gas tank was found abandoned in a field in suburban East Mantmeal. The search area moved to the northern part of Chester County. The fugitives' movements again changed the search perimeter. On September 11th, as the search continued, Cavalcante was added to the Interpol list, and authorities increased the reward for information on his whereabouts. That same night, emergency services received a call from a local resident. He reported that a man similar in description had broken into the garage of his home. The homeowner was forced to open fire in self-defense and shot him 7 times. But Cavalcante was able to escape the home and steal a .22 caliber rifle with a scope and flashlight from the home. Police immediately arrived on the scene and found Cavalcante's sweatshirt and shoes in close proximity to the home. Once the identity of the perpetrator was confirmed and it was determined that the dangerous felon was now armed, police urged residents in the South Coventry neighborhood to lock all doors, windows, and vehicles and stay indoors if possible. The convicted felon is armed with a handgun and is particularly dangerous. Cavalcante's escape has alarmed many area residents. School districts canceled classes for the day after Cavalcante was spotted on surveillance video. Police expanded the search and urged residents to keep their doors locked. Police set up a new search perimeter in South Coventry Township that was tighter than previous ones, because they were certain Cavalcante was now surrounded. The search continued throughout the day on September 12th. Around 1 a.m. on September 13th, an aircraft with thermal imaging technology spotted Cavalcante in the woods. Despite the sighting, police had to wait until sunrise to approach due to inclement weather that prevented the surveillance plane from operating safely. The big breakthrough came in the early morning hours of September 13th, when authorities learned that a security alarm went off shortly after midnight within the final search perimeter. According to Bivens, an Office of Illicit Drug Enforcement aircraft using thermal imaging technology detected a heat signal in the area around 1 a.m. The alarm was triggered. Technology really played a major role in this, said Ron Johnson, a retired Missouri State Highway Patrol captain. Things went against law enforcement for a long time, but they paused in time and were able to pick up the heat signature from a DEA spy plane. Around 8 a.m. on September 13th, police found Cavalcante asleep with the rifle he had stolen from his home 2 nights earlier. Danilo Cavalcante, a dangerous criminal, attempted to escape by crawling into thick undergrowth, but a police dog named Yoda subdued him by biting his head and holding him until police arrived. Lieutenant Colonel George Bivens said at a news conference that Yoda caused Cavalcante minor head injuries during his capture. They were able to land very quietly, Bivens said. We have the element of surprise, and that allowed us to capture the fugitive without casualties. Cavalcante was questioned by police immediately after his capture, where he said he survived on watermelons and creek water, traveled only at night, and even once almost got caught by a police officer while hiding. Cavalcante planned to steal a car and travel to Canada. Since returning to prison, Cavalcante has been charged with multiple crimes related to his escape, including burglary, trespassing, and theft. Following the capture of high-risk felon Danilo Cavalcante, local and state officials, including Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, expressed gratitude to the many law enforcement officers who assisted in the search. Chester County District Attorney Deb Ryan stated, "Today is a great day here in Chester County. Our nightmare is finally over, and the good guys won. We are indebted to all first responders for their tireless and dedicated efforts to bring this fugitive to justice. They worked around the clock, and we are deeply grateful to them all." Chief George Bivens, who led the search, discussed the various challenges law enforcement officers had to overcome to find Cavalcante, noting the intense heat and thunderstorms that occurred in the area during the search, as well as the fact that each of the search perimeters established during the search were in heavily wooded areas. The search team consisted of approximately 500 law enforcement officers, including Pennsylvania State Police, FBI, ATF, and U.S. Marshals, who searched the area around the shooting scene. Police established a perimeter of several miles in each direction. Following Cavalcante's escape, the Chester County Jail Board, which oversees the Chester County Jail, was heavily criticized by residents in the area for failing to prevent Cavalcante's escape. Residents noted that the jail had the opportunity to make appropriate security improvements following Igor Bolte's May 19th escape attempt, and that those improvements could have potentially prevented Cavalcante's escape because he used the same method Bolte used to escape. The prison has already fired the prison guard who was on duty during Cavalcante's September 7th escape, with prison officials claiming that the guard had the opportunity to spot Cavalcante during the escape. Days after the offender's capture, the Chester County Jail announced that they had installed a tin roof over the area, where Cavalcante climbed up 2 walls to access the roof and escape, along with various other security measures and improvements. I think there are obviously questions that Chester County officials are going to have to answer as to how the suspect was able to escape, especially given the history of this prison, said Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. The communication, cooperation of all law enforcement agencies and local residents who came together during what has been such a long search for the state helped to catch and honorably punish the evil. Danilo will now never go free.